welcome to the personal side of business, where every business has a story. Today, I'd like to welcome Daniel Castaneda, APC. He's an attorney of over 15 years with experience in immigration and criminal defense law in San Diego, with a focus on family petitions, visas, and deportation defense. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, good afternoon.
So, how did we get here?
How did I become a lawyer? How did I get involved in this whole thing? Well, a little bit of my history. I was originally born in Mexico City, and my mother's German. My dad is from the Pacific coast of Mexico, and they randomly met in Acapulco. I was brought into this world, but my grandfather's is from Illinois, so I would come and visit Chicago during the summers. So I was raised in Mexico City till I was 18, but would spend a lot of time in Chicago with my grandparents. I would spend the summers up here. So I had that exposure, and I had the opportunity to come to the States because through my mother, I became a US citizen. Well, through my grandfather, actually, who made my mother a US citizen. And then I was able to become a US citizen, even though I lived in Mexico. So I am a product sort of the immigration system, which I later realized as I grew up. So as a result of having that connection in Chicago, I was exposed to the Midwest. I wanted to go to school here, and I applied to Michigan State, and that's where I went to college. I'm one of five siblings, and my sister is a lawyer. She's older. She's in London. My oldest brother went to law school in Mexico City. My father is a lawyer in Mexico. My two of my aunts are lawyers in Mexico, so it's kind of in the family, but it was never pushed upon us. My undergrad is in psychology. After graduating Michigan State, I went back to Mexico City for a little bit, then transferred to a university here in San Diego, and I got a master's degree in international relations. So I was still kind of trying to figure things out. And then it just kind of hit me that I wanted to continue education. My wife has a PhD. The people around me were still continuing their education. I wasn't ready to settle in a job with the 40 hours, and I was still curious. So law school came about. I applied, and it was very interesting. It was a very formative experience. And what I liked about it was it just gave you these tools, and opened up this whole arena because it's the legal environment is very broad, and there are different branches that you can expose yourself, and you can decide, and it's kind of based a little bit on your personality because there's a certain estate planning has a certain, I believe, certain temperament, tax attorneys, corporate attorneys, litigators. So it's a very broad field that I think can cater to someone's personality.
Did you know you wanted to get into immigration law?
No, I did not. I did not. I was really not sure of that area. I started litigation, civil litigation at a firm, and when I first started, too, the bankruptcies were a big thing. And at first, it's just kind of getting into the field because I had no experience in the legal field. My family's background was in law in Mexico, so I had no relative that could kind of show me the ropes, if you will, of the immigration or legal system here in the U.S. It was after I gained an internship, and then a friend of mine had me. He left a firm and he recommended me, and they did immigration and criminal defense. And I liked the environment. I liked being able to talk to a lot of people. I'm bilingual, so there was a huge Hispanic population, and that allowed me easy access to communicate. And I liked helping people. I liked the criminal area too, in terms of I've always found it to be, I have a privilege to help people and to go in to detention centers to meet them in these very troublesome times and provide some hope, provide some help, in their language, and just being a defense attorney, providing that defense. And that's, I think, what I liked, and it just clicked. I didn't like when I did civil litigation. I didn't like per se the adversarial element to it, and most of those cases are contract disputes. It's all about money, and there is money to be made, but at the end, you're just pursuing money. Someone owes me money. We're going to fight. We're going to litigate, and then or divorce law, family law is also very confrontative. not that criminal defense and immigration are not confrontative, but at least I feel there's a different element because you're fighting against the government to a degree, and there's discretionary elements. It's not black and white, and you're fighting for people's liberty, people's rights, and so it's a little bit more profound to a degree, more rewarding, at least in my perspective. But it was really by chance that I didn't like civil litigation. My friend was able to connect me with this job, and I really enjoyed it, and I liked the people I worked with. And then after 6 years of working with them, I went solo, and I've been doing my practice ever since.
And what were other fields of law that your family was in?
They do contract disputes. My sister, she works for a big insurance company in London. Yeah, and my brother-in-law works for the BBC as an attorney as well. So it's we're all
So if someone were to get in trouble, your family would be the one that they
yeah,
would go to.
exactly. There's the right. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So was your family being in law the inspiration for you to get into it, or were you just comfortable going into this career?
No, it was very my dad never really enforced that on us. I wanted to be a therapist when I went to psych. My mother is a therapist, and I want that's why I went into psychology. I think I liked talking to people. I liked the confidentiality element that people kind of tell you their secrets, in counseling them. And I think that was the underlying thing. And then so it wasn't something I was in pursuit of something, but I wasn't sure what it was. I just wanted to keep studying, and I was more concerned of having a mundane job, something that I wouldn't feel satisfied with. So it was that pursuit, and then being open, exposed to this firm, and this. It's an interesting lifestyle. It's not monotonous. I go to different courthouses almost every other day of the week. I meet different people from all over the world, so it's very dynamic, and that's when I saw that, that's when it clicked, and I was like, yes, this is what I want to do, even though it took me a while to find it.
And in regards to work life balance, being an immigration lawyer and a criminal defense lawyer, do you feel like your hours are a lot more because you have to deal with these two sides of law? Or is it always like that in law?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think work life balance is something that I mean in every profession, we discuss. But I've been I think in these 15 years there's been different ups and downs in terms of that, and I do try to make that now my focus. I've definitely been very recently very busy, but I still have the benefit of running my own practice. And one differences in my practice when you deal with court cases, you are in control of your calendar to a very large degree. You set future hearings. The judge normally is very considerate of your availability. So you have that flexibility to organize your calendar in terms of hearings and in terms of when to meet with clients. So yeah, it's a juggling act, but I have two kids. I'm happily married, and I like to be part of their lives. I think that's going to be important. They're still young, 7 and 10, and yeah, sometimes it is a juggling act, but I make that a priority. If not, I've been on the side where, especially when you're starting, I feel to a degree where you really have to make up for it. You're learning the ropes. You and you're a little overwhelmed. It's easy to get overwhelmed, but now my wife has been with me through high school, through not high school, through law school. It feels like high school. So she's seen it, but I think I've have a pretty good hang on it where I feel comfortable with what I'm doing. I know how to pick my cases and how to avoid being overwhelmed. I think that's when you're overwhelmed, you can't focus on your priorities and things lose a lot.
Were you with a firm when you started?
Yeah, I started
How long were you with them?
6 years. I was with them for 6 years. Well, I think I was there with a couple of other associates, and we all kind of matured. And I think even the senior partner noticed that, and there was like we'd reached our limit, sort of thing. That we weren't going to be made associates or partners, and it was kind of we all noticed it was a time to go. We knew it. We learned the ropes, and we're like, okay, yeah, we can all do it, and we're all. I still stay in touch with them, and we're all independent attorneys, and we just run into each other in court, but we're all colleagues that started in the same firm, basically.
Has the amount of work changed recently with the new administration this year?
Yes, after this administration, there's been an increase in enforcement, particularly by ICE. Okay, so there's been an increase in detentions, and that's part of my focus is deportation defense, and it's been across the board. It's been with residents, it's been with undocumented individuals, it's been with people that have been under humanitarian status, and basically groups of people, students, and groups of people that we've never imagined would be targeted per se. And there's been again an increase in enforcement is how I perceive it, where a lot of these cases were just let be because they didn't seem to be enforcement priorities, and that was a criteria up until recently to a degree on the government. The judge would inquire whether this is an enforcement priority, whether the issues that this immigrant raised are sufficient enough to invest all these resources in having them deported and having them detained, removed, etc. And prior to this administration, they wouldn't be considered enforcement priorities. But
Because the way I'm looking at it, it seems like it's coming out of nowhere, right? Is it just because it's changing it, and before we were just letting it go, and now the administration is actually trying to make a point of enforcing these laws? Because you look at it for the college kids, and they're getting the threat of deportation for posting something online or their beliefs. And I feel like that's infringing on freedom of speech.
right, the student situation is a little tricky because it's unfolding as we speak. From what I've gathered and in my personal experience in helping students who's um, it's it's an F1 visa that most of these students are arrive into the US with, and their visas are being revoked for a variety of reasons. One apparently, yes, is protesting at schools. The other one that I've noticed is if there's been an encounter with law enforcement, be it an arrest or be it a conviction. Okay. Um, I can understand when there's a criminal element uh, involved because that could reasonably trigger a violation of the visa status. Because if you obtain a visa, one of the requirements is to abide by the law. Okay, but and theoretically, one an arrest could possibly be enough to cause for the visa to be revoked, and possibly even a conviction. Most likely, a conviction. But what we're seeing right now is a termination of these F1 visas in a like linear level, or where they're in the cases I've seen, they are going apparently down a list and seeing, yeah, if in fact a student had an encounter with law enforcement, being a conviction, being an arrest, or being if they left, if they fall out of status, which means they remained here after their F1 visas had expired. So yes, these parameters had already been in place. It's just they weren't really enforced in the past. Yeah.
So let's explore that. Someone who's visiting here with a visa or someone who's undocumented, what rights do they have?
So I think a typical scenario would be someone that's undocumented. Okay, a typical case sort of that I run into recently. Someone that's been undocumented. Let's say they've been here over 10 years. Okay, they're working, they are married, and they have two U.S. citizen children. Okay, they get arrested, be it for example, one case I have for reckless driving. Okay, not even driving under the influence, just a reckless driving, and they have a criminal case pending, they have criminal court pending, and they're taken by ICE while their criminal case is pending, and they're detained in immigration at the detention center. The detention centers have a court system within them. So what happens is we schedule a hearing for the judge to hear the case, and it's called a bond hearing. We request the judge to release the individual out on bond. And through this procedure, we have to show evidence that, in fact, the individual has been here for 10 years, that he's married, that he has kids, and that he qualifies for certain programs. Okay, be it a cancellation of their deportation, be it adjustment of their status through their spouse, uh, there's certain waivers for or programs for members of the parents of military members. So we explore all these avenues with the judge at a bond hearing, and that's just pertaining to their release. Okay, their deportation hearing is something separate that's still ongoing, but ideally we focus on their release first. So this individual gets taken to ICE. We file for a bond hearing, and there, the judge in general has to consider two issues: whether the individual is a flight risk, that is, we have to guarantee to the judge that this individual, if released, will appear in all future hearings. And we do that through showing letters from friends and family, their kids, their job, strong ties to the community. The second element the judge looks into is whether these individuals are a risk to the community. And that's where we focus on criminal records, et cetera, any other violations. And here in this particular case, reckless driving obviously doesn't look good, but his case is still pending, so he hasn't been convicted of the crime itself. But the judge will obviously want to look into the reasons surrounding this incident because, again, does he pose a risk to the community? And driving recklessly is definitely an issue that hits on that particular point. So we go back and forth, we argue it, and based on the facts, and at the end, the judge decides if the individual can be released under a reasonable bond. And if he does, they pay the bond, and the individual is released, and we fight their case out of custody, and the case can be eventually decided by a judge.
So the way you're describing it, it's more like a case by case basis, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's an individual basis for sure.
So when someone is being detained by ICE right now, what is their right? What should they do?
I've discussed this topic, in especially at the beginning of the year. The ACLU issued several pamphlets, and it was an agency giving out. They called them the red cards, where they gave people their list of their constitutional rights. You know, you have every right to inquire if you have an encounter with an ICE officer in a very respectful manner. You can inquire, hey, what's the reason? Who are you looking for? Can I see the document that shows that you're looking for me? You know, it just ask questions is what I recommend my client. You know, obviously in a respectful manner, et cetera, et cetera, because you have still a Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable search and seizures. Okay, so they have to have a basis. However, there's a caveat to that when you live within 100 miles of the border or the coastline. So within San Diego area and public areas, the CBP officials can inquire as to your lawful status. So it's a term matter of national security. So that already kind of withers away a little bit of your rights.
Which for San Diego, you're already in a corner,
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, which then triggers the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Okay, and these are hypotheticals, and I always emphasize that it's very easy to talk about it here without having a huge armed ICE officer yelling at you, and it's a very intimidating and scary experience, and you're not going to have. It's understandable that you're not going to be cool, calm, collected, and say, "Can I see your badge?" You know, and question their authority, but but having a right not to self-incriminate is important for people to know because the government has the burden of showing alienage. And if you admit to certain things, they can use that against you, like in criminal cases. Where are you from the U.S.? No. Well, then you just admitted you're not a U.S. citizen. Are you from Mexico? Well, yes. Well, boom, you just helped us by showing you. Obviously, they have to have evidence, but this is what they'll report in their report, and that's what people are also worried about is if they go looking for someone. For example, there's been raids at restaurants, you know, and they go look for one cook, but they take all the line cooks, you know, and it's because of this uh, inquiry investigation that ICE officers or CBP officers make, where they're like, "Well, you just admit, do you have papers? No, you just admit it. You're undocumented," and that is technically enough for them to pick you up and detain you, not deport you, but still send you to detention.
So when they're in detention, do you feel like detainees know that they should be contacting a lawyer? Do you think they know what their rights are? Or do you think the situation is they're just not educated enough in that area to know what
Hmm.
to do
Well,
next?
on that point, I do have to say that judges, immigration judges, are very thorough in informing people that number one, the government will not provide paid counsel for them, unlike in criminal proceedings, but they do give them a list, and Homeland Security also gives a list to these individuals of attorneys and pro bono agencies that they can reach out to and speak to. So, and I was in court today, and several people appeared without an attorney, and the judge immediately gave them an opportunity to go find one, but with that caveat that it's either a pro bono attorney that it's discretionary if the agency will take the case, or they will have to incur the cost of hiring their own attorney.
I feel like there's this misconception for immigrants coming over the border and why they're coming here. In your experience, what is the driving force for people to cross borders to come into a country like the US?
Mhm. Yeah, I think. I mean, I can't. I think most of the clients that I know in my experience, most people I don't think they would come if they didn't have to. Everybody misses home. I think if they could live, if they could earn a living back home as they do here with having the safety, the economic security, back home, that would be. There's a famous quote, and I can't mention it, but it goes to that. If most immigrants don't want to necessarily be here, it's you don't want to leave home. Home is home. Home is where you were raised, where the food, your friends, that cultural environment. I mean, it's fun to travel, but there is I think most immigrants do miss home. America's great. It has its benefits, but that's why there's a lot of immigrants that send their money back home to make that home eventually and go back because it's it's still not home. And obviously the experience can be a little bit different for everybody in terms of when you came here. If you were a kid, obviously you don't know your home, and this is your home. But your parents obviously miss miss their home, but it's I think it's mostly necessity. It's mostly necessity and education. I mean, now with these students, there's a huge number of uh, of international students wanting to come to these great academic institutions. I mean, I wanted to come here for that reason. And yeah, the American dream, but if you could have, I feel a decent wage back home and safety and an opportunity to move up, as you do here, people wouldn't come. Trust me. I feel it's just that. It's really fleeing crime, economic uncertainty, and yeah, also the belief that things are going to be better here.
When a deportation happens and there are family members still living in the US, how does that affect the family from what you've seen?
Well, I think it's a little bit different in San Diego because it obviously varies. Sometimes because in certain cases the judge wants to know, asks that particular question. Like in our example, so you've been here 10 years, you have a wife and kids. If I deport you, what are they gonna do? And we have to answer that question. He has to answer that question. Will they stay? And it's literally a box. Will they stay? Yes or no? And if yes, and if no, why? Explain. And yeah, it varies by each case, but the judges know that we live in a border town, and sometimes in some cases they discredit the hardship that the family will feel if the person's deported because they ask the individual, where are you going to go live? And in Tijuana. And like, well, Tijuana's 20 minutes away. Your wife and kids, they're U.S. citizens. They can go see you. It's very inhumane, but it's practical, and that's how they see things. So people kind of maneuver. But imagine if you're across the
In
country, in
Michigan,
Michigan, right? I mean, that is you don't know. I mean, that's very very detrimental. It can be a traumatic, painful experience for the rest of your life.
from what you've seen, do families move back altogether or do some stay here and the kids live here and the parents go back? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the kids, and many times people just stay here. Because especially if you have kids, you want them to live here, to go to school here, and they don't know their home country.
And I'm assuming there's no agencies in the United States that helps those families financially.
Well, I mean, they might go in some sort. No, but no particular agency. But yeah, they
Like an organization that comes out and say, you've been struggling, we can help you for the next 6 months or something like that.
no.
And if you could change the system, one major thing in the system right now, what would it be?
Well, I think the one thing is make all DACA's residents. I think that's the lowest hanging fruit. These are kids that literally came here without their will, under 15. You're just obeying your mom. Get in this car, let's go. You can't break the law without the intent of breaking the law. And they didn't break the law. And they've been here. They don't even know the language. And they went to school. So that's the one I feel that's any president that enforces that. I mean, that's a huge population of kids that
Oh, so that's not a thing right now.
the DACA program is still in place, but there's a restraining order. It's been restrained where they're not accepting new applications. Well, you can apply, they'll accept the fees, but they won't issue a work document or a response. So your case is in limbo. And people are still applying to it if you satisfy the requirements for initial applications. But people that received it, they can continue renewing their work permit, but they don't have resident status and they're not citizens. And that status, it could be taken away immediately. So that one I would love to see with it. All these kids, which are now adults, because when I started, that was one of my first jobs. Was we filled out DACA applications for all these kids, and I'm there with the mom and like a 9-year-old kid and their vaccine record, or a 16-year-old kid that he graduated high school, and we're just typing them in and getting all these documents, and that was an incredible experience because you hear all these, because then you had to write the story too, a declaration as to how did you come into the country. We were really busy back then, but I was like, wow, this is this. And then boom, you get the work permit, and the parents are so happy, and then that could lead to some other avenue. You could apply for a parole in place, which means a permit to go visit home, like your grandmother or a relative, and come back legally, come back with a lawful entry into the United States, because most of these kids also have illegal entries, which the government frowns upon. But so there's certain avenues, but right now they just have these kids in limbo, renewing their work permits, but in threatening to deport them or cancel the program. And
So in that renewal process, do kids just get lost in the system and then disappear, don't come back?
the renewal,
Yeah.
no, not some, but I feel very few, because that's your lifeline. I mean, that's what gets you the job, your social security. And now with the Real ID Act, I mean, that is
So it's really important for them to stay in touch.
current. Yeah, yeah, you got to renew it. There's many organizations out there that do it for free. But yes, I mean, yeah, I definitely hear clients run that don't renew it. You could still renew it even if it expires, but or no, you know what? No, I think you don't let it expire. Just renew it in time, 6 months in advance. But yeah, keep that, because they want to take it away, and many people wish they would have applied and didn't. And now the programs.
So let's just say you're a senior in high school and you happen to get into some sort of legal trouble at that point. What's your next step? What should you do? Should you contact a lawyer right away? Should you start to figure out the criminal side first or your status side next? What's the right move?
So imagine someone, typical scenario, someone is undocumented and they get pulled over for driving without a license. Okay. Um, that could be a misdemeanor just alone. Okay. And they wouldn't get arrested. They would probably go to court. Okay. And deal with that incident. If it's something more serious like a DUI, they will get arrested, and there's a possibility that ICE can detain them while their DUI case is pending. Okay, so yes, but if ICE doesn't detain them, they can go to court. There's public defenders that represent individuals, and now uh, public defenders are very thorough in inquiring about people's immigration background. So they
So with
try
a
to.
public defender, Do they just deal with the legal side or they deal with the legal immigration status as well? Or do they just leave it to someone else to do it?
Yeah, no, they only handle the criminal side. Yeah. Yeah, they they do have attorneys that they counsel with in terms of deciding whether the immigration consequences of a guilty plea, okay, if it's going to affect them, how it's going to affect them in immigration. And they do contact their in-house immigration attorney to advise them as to what best course of action to take to minimize the effects of immigration. But in case this individual he walks outside of the courthouse and they pick him up after he pled guilty, then the public defenders are not at all responsible for that individual because they you don't have a right to counsel or paid counsel in immigration. You have to either get a one pro bono or hire one yourself. So yeah, if that individual gets taken by ICE and he's unable to contact his family. I mean, they do have access to phones, but you can definitely go down the limbo lay tunnel of being detained in immigration, and it takes time to get you out of there.
Do you have to finish your legal case before you can deal with your immigration status?
Well, ideally you could, but there's Trump's first day in office, he signed the Lincoln Riley Act, which, among other things, allowed Homeland Security officials to detain individuals charged of certain violent crimes, certain particular crimes. So that is a little concerning because the case could be pending. You could just be accused by it and you're detained in immigration. So, and you could even be held to mandatory custody. So that could create a due process issue because the criminal case should be decided, especially if you're being held in immigration as a result of that criminal case. But I've been successful in being able to bond out individuals from immigration court while their criminal case is pending because I believe it establishes a good foundation for the immigration judge to release this individual because the judge in the immigration court already evaluated the case and allowed the individual to be released. So that analysis was already, I always argue this, that it was already considered by another judge, and he deemed that this individual was not a risk to the community, was not a flight risk, and agreed to release him on bond, and he should be allowed to appear in all future hearings. And then Homeland Security can take any determination later after that case is settled.
So that assessment will determine a lot of things. It's not just for your legal case. So, what are some legal pathways for undocumented immigrants to become citizens?
Okay. Well, the most straightforward is through family. Okay, a spouse is you get married to a U.S. citizen. They can petition you, and the big issue here is whether you entered lawfully or unlawfully. Okay, if you entered lawfully, that means with a visa or a parole, and you marry a U.S. citizen, you can adjust your status, become a resident here in the U.S. Okay. If you entered lawfully and you have a son or daughter over the age of 21, you can also obtain your residency here. However, if you entered illegally, undocumented, uh, and you're married to a U.S. citizen, you can initiate your process here. Then you have to apply for a waiver due to your unlawful presence. And once that waiver is approved, then the waiver is based on your spouse's hardship. You have to go to an interview to your country, the U.S. embassy in your country of origin, for a short period of time. Uh, you go to your interview, you present the documents, and after your interview, you are allowed to come into the U.S. as a resident. But that is a lengthy process, but those are the general legal pathways to obtain residence through family is the easiest one.
Is there a way for an undocumented immigrant to do that on their own?
Yes. Yeah, I've met some people and I've met some people that have done it, like young couples and stuff, and the internet is a wonderful tool. And if they don't have any prior marriages, any criminal issues, and they feel confident, I mean, yeah, but there's always a little bit of of a risk, especially right now. But yes, I've had people that have done it on their own and feel pretty comfortable.
Can a single person do that on their own?
Oh no, just you on your own? No, no, because you have to have something that bring ties you to the US. Yeah.
So if you're here and you don't know anyone, God forbid, you're on your own, you don't have any family or friends to help deal with it, you're basically on your own, and then you just have to figure it
Hmm.
out.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, and that's how it's been for a lot of people for many, many years.
And what's your advice for people right now who are scared, worried about ICE, and don't know really what to do?
Hmm. The big one is they've always said this is if you get detained, sign to see a judge. Okay, we've always said like or just I want to see a judge. Don't sign your voluntary departure. Is would be my recommendation. I know it's kind of broad, but and it can be kind of scary. And in general, I have seen immigration enforcement officials evaluate a case and know that someone shouldn't be removed in an expedited manner, and that they have a right to see a judge. Okay, but still, people should feel comfortable in saying I want to see a judge. I want to have an opportunity to fight my case. That would be one. Number two, stay out of trouble, particularly now. You know, that's an obvious one. And get your paperwork in order. Many times in these cases, especially if you've been here for a long time, if you've paid taxes, many people pay taxes with an ITIN number. If you have a bank account, statements, record your kids' birth certificates, you can get a passport. Go to your local consulate and schedule a time to set an appointment to get your passport, get all your documents in order, scanned. Because all of this, if immigration comes and you have a court case, we're going to need all that evidence. So, and having that organized is very important. And a lot of people that I deal with, even though they're undocumented, they have the records. You know, they've been paying taxes and everything, and they're very organized. So that helps. And then the other one would be explore all your avenues. You know, if you do have kids over 21, can they let's inquire if they can petition you if your spouse is a citizen or even a resident. You can start to petition. That petition process can be initiated. One other thing is I'm recommending people to get their background checks. You can get your FBI records, or there's also your record from the Freedom of Information through the Freedom of Information website, where it's a free system where you are allowed to obtain your immigration background through this portal. It takes a couple months, but people that know that had encounters or that had a previous petition filed, they can. The government keeps a record of that, so they can obtain a copy. And people also, the residents, if they have been here for either the 3 years or 5 years that are needed to apply for citizenship, because there's a lot of people that have been residents for a very long time, but they're still vulnerable for deportation. So they, if once you're a citizen, at least as of today, you can't be deported.
And what would your advice be for someone getting into law?
Into into well, it's an exciting time, very interesting time because the laws are being challenged. The Supreme Court is very active, but it's a great arena, and I've been on the defense for all my life as practicing, but I have had colleagues that were in the defense side and were now work for Homeland Security. I know judges that were in the private bar, then went to Homeland Security and then became a judge. So I feel that uh, you can it's personality and you, but at the same time it's the work you're doing, and if you enjoy that work, it doesn't matter what side you're on. It's still imparting follow making sure that justice and the rules are followed accordingly. I think that's the underlying thing that we're all trying to do.
And Daniel, where can we find you on the internet?
Well, my website is castalegal.com. My name is Daniel Castaneda. And Daniel Castaneda, yeah, I'm on Google. I'm on Facebook. And I'm on. A judge the other day said right while I was on the record, he very nice judge. I sat down, we're on the record, and he said, "Oh, I saw your ad while I was playing solitary on my computer." And he looks at his clerk, he's like, "Right?" And I'm like, "Oh my god!" There's like it's full of attorneys, full of And then for a couple minutes, we just started bantering about marketing and how in one of his firms, someone wanted to get a guy with the spinner, and we even talked about Attorney King and his
Oh yeah,
fancy
right. The
car.
Detroit cars. Yes,
This
bad
I
idea.
felt so bad. Yeah, no, but I thought it was still tasteful, but it was a funny interaction with the judge. So yeah, I'm out there if you Google me.
Thank you, Daniel, for being guest and sharing your knowledge. This is a personal side of business.